Alex, what is this? I demanded, my voice trembling with a mix of anger and disbelief as I held up his phone. The messages on the screen were explicit, undeniable, and they bore Christina's name. Alex looked up from the couch, his eyes widening. Felicity, where did you get that? He reached out, but I pulled the phone away, clutching it tightly. That's not the point, I said, my heart pounding in my chest. What are these messages? What have you been doing with Christina? He ran a hand through his hair, his face pale. It's not what it looks like. Really? I scoffed, scrolling through the damning texts. Because it looks pretty clear to me. How long has this been going on? Alex stood up, his height imposing, but I held my ground. Felicity, please. Let's talk about this calmly. Calmly? I echoed, my voice rising. You want me to be calm after finding out you've been cheating on me with my best friend? Daniel's small voice cut through the tension. Mom, Dad, what's going on? Our 8-year-old son stood in the doorway, his eyes wide with confusion. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. Daniel, sweetheart, why don't you go play in your room? Mommy and Daddy need to talk. He hesitated, sensing the seriousness of the situation, but eventually nodded and disappeared down the hall. Felicity, I can explain. Alex started, but I shook my head. Save it. I don't want to hear your excuses right now. I turned away, my mind racing. I needed proof, undeniable proof, before I confronted Christina. I couldn't let this blow up without being fully prepared. I heard Alex sigh behind me. What are you going to do? Right now I'm going to gather my thoughts, I said, my voice cold. And you, Alex, are going to stay away from me until I decide what happens next. I walked out of the living room, my hands shaking. I needed to talk to someone, and there was only one person who could give me the guidance I needed. I dialed my mother's number, my breath hitching as I waited for her to pick up. Felicity, dear, is everything all right? Margaret's warm voice came through the line, instantly soothing some of my frayed nerves. No, Mom, it's not, I admitted, my voice breaking. I found out Alex is having an affair. With Christina. There was a pause, and then Margaret's voice hardened. Oh, darling. I'm so sorry. What do you need from me? I need advice. I don't know what to do. I want to confront him, but I need more proof. And I don't want Daniel to get caught in the middle of this. Come over, she said firmly. We'll figure this out together. And bring Daniel. He shouldn't be in that house right now. I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. Okay, we'll be there soon. I hung up and walked to Daniel's room, finding him playing with his toys, his innocent face a stark contrast to the turmoil I felt inside. Daniel, sweetheart, we're going to Grandma's house for a while, okay? He looked up, his eyes curious. Why, Mom? Because we need a little break, I said, forcing a smile. Go pack a few of your favorite things. As he scampered off, I went to the bedroom and grabbed a suitcase, throwing in essentials. My mind was a whirlwind of thoughts, but one thing was clear. I couldn't let this betrayal destroy me. I had to stay strong for Daniel. When we arrived at my mother's house, Margaret enveloped me in a tight hug. We'll get through this, Felicity, she whispered. You're not alone. I nodded, tears streaming down my face. Thank you, Mom. She pulled back, her eyes filled with determination. Now, let's figure out our next steps. For you and for Daniel. As I sat down with my mother, the weight of the situation began to settle in, but so did a sense of resolve. This was just the beginning. I would gather the proof I needed, and then I would confront Christina. They would both pay for this betrayal. The next morning, I woke up with a heavy heart, but a clear mind. I needed to gather more evidence. I couldn't let Alex or Christina wriggle out of this with mere words. I had to protect Daniel and myself. Mom, can you watch Daniel for a bit? I need to run some errands, I said, pouring myself a cup of coffee in Margaret's cozy kitchen. Of course, dear. Take all the time you need, Margaret replied, her eyes filled with concern but also strength. She knew what I was about to do. I kissed Daniel on the forehead as he sat at the kitchen table, engrossed in a puzzle. Be good for Grandma, okay? Okay, Mom, he said, looking up at me with those big, innocent eyes. I had to do this for him. I drove back to our house, my mind racing with plans. I needed to find concrete evidence of Alex's infidelity. As I entered the house, the silence was deafening. I went straight to Alex's study, where he spent most of his time lately. I started searching through his desk drawers, feeling a mix of anger and sadness with each passing second. In the bottom drawer, hidden under a stack of old papers, I found a small velvet box. My heart pounded as I opened it to reveal an expensive-looking necklace. It was definitely not for me. I snapped a few pictures with my phone, my hands shaking. Next, I turned to his computer. I knew Alex wasn't the most tech-savvy person, so I hoped he hadn't covered his tracks too well. I opened his email and, sure enough, found a string of messages between him and Christina. They talked about their meetings, their plans, and the gifts he had bought her. I forwarded the emails to myself, feeling a sick sense of satisfaction. As I was about to close the laptop, I noticed a recent purchase history. Expensive dinners, hotel bookings, and luxury items, all for Christina. I took screenshots of everything. This was more than enough proof. I left the house, my mind buzzing with the next steps. I drove back to my mother's house, determined to share my findings with her. As soon as I walked in, Margaret looked up from the book she was reading. "Did you find what you needed?" she asked gently. "More than enough," I said, sitting down beside her and showing her the pictures and emails. "Look at this." He bought her a necklace, took her to fancy dinners, even booked hotel rooms. Margaret's face hardened. "This is despicable. You need to confront him, but you have to be smart about it. Think about Daniel." "I know, Mom. That's why I need your advice. How do I handle this without causing more harm to him?" Margaret took a deep breath. "You need to be calm and collected. Confront Alex first, but make sure Daniel is nowhere near. You don't want him to witness this. And as for Christina, she deserves to be confronted too, but not in front of her husband. You don't want to stoop to their level." I nodded, absorbing her words. "You're right. I'll call Samuel to watch Daniel. I need to follow Alex and see this with my own eyes. I need to be sure." Margaret squeezed my hand. "We'll get through this, Felicity. You're stronger than you think." Later that afternoon, I called Samuel. "Hey, can you come over? I need you to watch Daniel for a bit." "Of course, sis. I'll be there in 20 minutes," Samuel replied without hesitation. He had always been my rock. When he arrived, I explained the situation briefly. "I need to follow Alex. I need to see it for myself." Samuel nodded. "Go. I'll take care of Daniel. Just be careful." I hugged him tightly. "Thank you, Sam. I don't know what I'd do without you." I waited until evening, then followed Alex as he left the house. My heart raced as I tailed him to a fancy restaurant. I parked a few spots away and watched as he met Christina at the entrance. They embraced, and any lingering doubt I had vanished. I snapped a few more pictures, my hands steady this time. This was it, the proof I needed. As I drove back to my mother's house, my mind was set. Tomorrow I would confront Alex, and soon after Christina. They would both face the consequences of their betrayal. The next morning, I woke up with a sense of dread and determination. Today was the day I would confront Alex. I had all the evidence I needed, and now it was time to face him. But first, I needed to make sure Daniel was safe and away from the impending storm. "Samuel, can you come over again today?" I asked over the phone, my voice steady but urgent. "Of course, Felicity. I'll be there in an hour," Samuel replied, his tone filled with concern and readiness. After hanging up, I turned to my mother. "Mom, I'm going to confront Alex today. I need to make sure Daniel is with Samuel and away from the house." Margaret nodded, her eyes filled with understanding. "We'll take care of him. You focus on what you need to do." When Samuel arrived, I explained my plan. "I'm going to confront Alex. I need you to take Daniel out for the day. Maybe to the park or a movie. Just keep him occupied and away from the house." Samuel placed a reassuring hand on my shoulder. "You got it, sis. We'll have a great time. Just be careful." I hugged Daniel tightly before he left with Samuel. Have fun with Uncle Samuel, okay? Mommy will see you later. Okay, Mom, Daniel said, smiling up at me. His innocence was a stark reminder of why I needed to do this. Once they were gone, I took a deep breath and drove back to the house. Alex was sitting at the kitchen table, sipping his coffee, completely unaware of the storm about to hit him. Alex, we need to talk, I said, my voice firm. He looked up, surprise flickering in his eyes. What's going on, Felicity? I placed the printed emails, photos, and receipts on the table in front of him. This is what's going on. Explain this. Alex's face went pale as he looked at the evidence. Felicity, I can explain. Don't. I cut him off. Don't insult me with lies. How long has this been going on with Christina? He slumped in his chair, his facade crumbling. A few months. A few months. I echoed, my voice rising. You betrayed me, our family, for months? With my best friend. I'm sorry, he whispered, but the words felt hollow. Sorry isn't good enough. I snapped. You need to pack your things and leave. I can't have you here anymore. Alex stood up, his eyes filled with regret. Felicity, please. Let's talk this through. There's nothing to talk about, I said, my voice cold. You made your choice. Now you have to live with the consequences. As Alex packed his things, I felt a mix of anger, sadness, and relief. This was the right decision, but it didn't make it any easier. With Alex gone, I sat down with my mother. It's done. He's gone. Margaret hugged me tightly. You're strong, Felicity. You did the right thing. But I knew this was only the beginning. I still had to confront Christina. I needed to see her face when she realized the damage she had caused. The next day, I called Christina. We need to talk. Can you meet me at the park in an hour? Sure, she replied, her voice cheerful and oblivious. What's up? You'll find out, I said, hanging up. At the park, I waited, my heart pounding. When Christina arrived, she smiled, but her smile faded as she saw the look on my face. What's wrong, Felicity? She asked, concern lacing her voice. I handed her the same evidence I had shown Alex. This is what's wrong. Christina's face went white as she looked through the papers. Felicity, Save it, I interrupted. How could you do this to me? To us? You were my best friend. Tears welled up in her eyes. I'm so sorry. I never meant for it to go this far. Well, it did, I said, my voice shaking with anger. And now you have to face the consequences. I'm telling your husband. Christina's eyes widened in panic. Please don't. I'll end it. I'll do whatever you want. It's too late for that, I said, standing up. You both made your choices. Now you have to live with them. As I walked away, I felt a sense of empowerment. This was just the beginning of their downfall. They would both pay for their betrayal, and I would make sure of it. I sat in my car outside Christina's house, my heart pounding. I had called her husband, Michael, earlier that day, asking him to meet me here. He had sounded confused but agreed. Now, as I waited, the gravity of what I was about to do settled in. This wasn't just about Alex and Christina anymore. It was about exposing their betrayal to everyone involved. Michael's car pulled up, and he stepped out, looking around with a puzzled expression. I got out and walked over to him, clutching the folder of evidence in my hand. Felicity? What's going on? He asked, concern etched on his face. We need to talk, I said, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside. It's about Christina and Alex. Michael's eyes widened. What about them? I handed him the folder. Look at this. He opened it, flipping through the photos, emails, and receipts. His face went from confusion to shock, then to anger. This can't be true. I'm afraid it is, I said softly. I've seen them together. It's been going on for months. Michael's hands trembled as he closed the folder. I can't believe this. Why didn't you tell me sooner? I needed to be sure, I explained. I didn't want to accuse them without proof. But now, you deserve to know the truth. Michael looked at me, his eyes filled with a mix of pain and gratitude. Thank you for telling me. I need to confront her. I'll be right here if you need me, I said, watching as he walked to the front door and rang the bell. Christina opened the door, her face lighting up when she saw Michael. Hey, honey, what are you doing here? Michael's expression was stony. We need to talk. Now. Christina's smile faltered, and she glanced over his shoulder, spotting me. Her face went pale. Michael, what's going on? Inside, he said firmly, stepping past her. I stayed outside, listening to the muffled voices inside. I could hear Michael's angry tone and Christina's increasingly desperate pleas. The tension was unbearable, but I knew this had to happen. After what felt like an eternity, the door opened and Michael stormed out, his face a mask of rage and betrayal. Christina followed, tears streaming down her face. Michael, please. It was a mistake. He turned to her, his voice cold. A mistake? Months of lies and deceit? That's more than a mistake, Christina. We're done. Christina collapsed on the doorstep, sobbing. Michael got into his car and drove off, leaving her there. I walked over, my heart aching despite everything. Felicity, she choked out, looking up at me with red, swollen eyes. Why did you do this? Because you needed to be held accountable, I said, my voice firm but not unkind. You hurt me, you hurt Michael, and you hurt our families. This had to stop. She buried her face in her hands, her shoulders shaking with sobs. I never meant for it to go this far. I don't know what I was thinking. That's the problem, I said softly. You weren't thinking about anyone but yourself. I turned and walked away, leaving her to face the consequences of her actions. As I drove back to my mother's house, I felt a strange mix of emotions: relief, sadness, and a sense of justice. This wasn't over, but it was a step in the right direction. Back at my mother's, I found her and Samuel in the living room, talking quietly. Daniel was playing with his toys, oblivious to the storm that had just passed. How did it go? Margaret asked, her eyes filled with concern. It's done, I said, sitting down heavily. Michael knows. It's over between them. Margaret nodded, her expression one of approval. You did the right thing, Felicity. Samuel put a hand on my shoulder. What's next? I took a deep breath. I need to figure out how to move forward. For Daniel and me. This isn't just about exposing them. It's about rebuilding our lives. As I sat there, surrounded by my family, I realized that this was just the beginning. There were still battles to fight, but I wasn't alone. And with their support, I knew I could face whatever came next. The next few days were a whirlwind of emotions and decisions. I knew I couldn't stay in the house where every corner reminded me of Alex's betrayal. I needed a fresh start for Daniel and me, but the logistics of moving out, finding a new place, and ensuring Daniel's stability weighed heavily on my mind. Mom, I need your help, I said one evening as we sat in her living room. Daniel was asleep upstairs, and Samuel had just left after another long day of support and planning. Margaret looked at me, her eyes full of concern and love. What do you need, dear? I need to move out of the house. I can't stay there any longer. But I don't want Daniel to be caught in the middle of all this. I need to make it as smooth as possible for him. Margaret nodded. You're right. Moving out is the best decision. But you'll need a plan. Have you thought about where you'll go? I've been looking at a few places, I said, pulling out my phone to show her some listings. But I need to finalize something soon. I can't keep living like this in limbo. Margaret studied the listings, then looked at me. Let's make a decision tonight. We'll find a place, and then we'll make a plan to move. You don't have to do this alone. I felt a wave of relief wash over me. Thank you, Mom. I don't know what I'd do without you. As we scrolled through the listings, Daniel's small voice interrupted us. Mom, Grandma, what are you doing? I turned to see him standing at the bottom of the stairs, rubbing his eyes. Hey, sweetheart. We were just looking at some new houses. How would you feel about moving to a new place? Daniel's eyes widened with curiosity. A new house? Will it be close to Grandma's? I smiled, kneeling down to his level. Yes, it will be close. And you'll have a new room, and maybe even a backyard to play in. He nodded, his face lighting up. That sounds fun. As I hugged him, I felt a renewed sense of determination. This was the right decision for both of us. The next morning, I called a real estate agent and arranged to visit a few properties. Samuel offered to come along, and Margaret agreed to watch Daniel. As we walked through the houses, I felt a mix of excitement and apprehension. Each place had its own charm, but I needed something that felt like home, a place where we could start fresh. Finally, we found it. A cozy two-bedroom house with a small garden and a bright, airy feel. It was perfect. I signed the lease, and the agent assured me we could move in within a week. Back at my mother's house, I shared the news with Daniel. Guess what, buddy? We found a new house. We'll be moving in next week. Daniel's eyes sparkled with excitement. Can I see it? Of course, I said, showing him pictures on my phone. This will be your new room. As he looked at the pictures, I felt a sense of peace. This was the right step forward. That evening, as I sat with Margaret, I felt the weight of the situation settle in. Mom, I need to tell Alex. He needs to know we're moving out. Margaret nodded. Yes, he does. But you need to be prepared for his reaction. This won't be easy. I took a deep breath. I know, but it's time. The next day, I called Alex. We need to talk. Can you come to the house? Felicity, what's going on? He asked, his voice tinged with worry. Just come, I said, hanging up. When he arrived, I met him outside. We're moving out, I said, handing him the lease agreement. Daniel and I are leaving. We need a fresh start. Alex's face went pale. Felicity, please. Don't do this. We can work things out. It's too late for that, I said firmly. This is what's best for Daniel and me. You need to accept it. He looked at me, desperation in his eyes. But where will I go? What about us? There is no us anymore, I said, my voice steady. You made your choice, and now I'm making mine. As I walked away, I felt a sense of finality. This was the right decision, but it didn't make it any easier. I had to be strong for Daniel, for myself. This was our new beginning, and I was determined to make it work. The day of the move came faster than I expected. Samuel and I had meticulously planned everything to ensure we could get in and out of the house while Alex was away. Still, my nerves were on edge as we loaded the last of the boxes into the truck. Mom, what if Daddy comes back while we're still here? Daniel asked, his eyes wide with concern as he clutched his favorite stuffed animal. I knelt down beside him, trying to keep my voice calm. Don't worry, sweetheart. Uncle Samuel and I have everything under control. We'll be out of here soon. Samuel gave me a reassuring nod as he closed the truck's back door. Let's get going, he said, his voice steady. We've got this. As we drove to our new house, a mix of relief and anxiety washed over me. This was a new beginning, but the thought of Alex finding out we'd left without a word gnawed at me. I had to stay strong for Daniel. When we arrived at the new house, Margaret was already there, waiting with open arms. Welcome home, she said, hugging me tightly. Daniel ran into the house, exploring every room with excitement. Mom, look, there's a tree in the backyard. Can I climb it? I laughed, feeling a sense of normalcy for the first time in weeks. Of course, but be careful. As we unpacked, Samuel and I kept an eye on the clock. We had planned everything to avoid Alex, but there was always a chance he might come home early. My heart raced every time I thought about it. Suddenly, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Alex. Where are you? The house is empty. What's going on? I showed the message to Samuel, my hands shaking. He's found out. What do I do? Samuel's face hardened. You need to tell him the truth, Felicity. It's time. I took a deep breath and dialed Alex's number. He answered on the first ring. Felicity, what the hell is going on? Where are you and Daniel? We've moved out, Alex, I said, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside. I told you this was going to happen. You can't just take my son and leave, he shouted, his anger palpable even through the phone. He's our son, Alex, I replied, trying to keep my composure. And I did what I had to do to protect him. You made your choices, and now I'm making mine. There was a long silence on the other end. Finally, Alex spoke, his voice softer but still filled with anger. Where are you? We're safe, I said, not giving him any more information. That's all you need to know right now. Felicity, please, he pleaded. Let's talk this through. We can work something out. It's too late for that, I said firmly. This is how it has to be. I hung up, my heart pounding. Samuel put a hand on my shoulder. You did the right thing, sis. Now we just need to focus on moving forward. As the evening settled in, I felt a sense of calm. Daniel was playing happily in his new room, and Margaret was making dinner in the kitchen. For the first time in a long while, I felt a glimmer of hope. But just as we were starting to relax, there was a loud knock at the door. My heart leaped into my throat. I exchanged a worried glance with Samuel, who walked over to the door and peered through the peephole. It's Alex, he said, his voice tense. He's here. I felt a surge of panic. What do we do? Samuel turned to me, his expression resolute. I'll handle it. You stay with Daniel. I nodded, my hands trembling as I went to Daniel's room. Sweetheart, stay here and play, okay? Mommy needs to talk to Uncle Samuel. Daniel looked up at me, sensing the tension. Is everything okay, Mom? Everything's fine, I said, forcing a smile. Just stay here for a bit. I closed the door and walked back to the living room, where Samuel was already talking to Alex through the slightly open front door. Alex, you need to leave, Samuel said firmly. This isn't the time or place. I need to see my son, Alex demanded, his voice filled with desperation. You can't keep him from me. I stepped forward, my voice shaking but determined. Alex, you need to go. This isn't the way to handle things. He looked at me, his eyes filled with a mix of anger and sadness. Felicity, please. Let me see him. Not like this, I said, standing my ground. We'll figure out a way, but not tonight. Please just go. After a tense moment, Alex finally nodded, his shoulders slumping in defeat. Fine, but this isn't over. As he walked away, I felt a wave of relief and exhaustion. This was far from over, but I had taken the first step. Now it was time to focus on rebuilding our lives, one day at a time. The days following Alex's visit were a blur of legal consultations and emotional turmoil. I knew I had to cut ties with him completely, but the reality of doing so was daunting. I spent hours on the phone with my lawyer, gathering documents and preparing for the inevitable confrontation. One evening, after putting Daniel to bed, I sat down with Margaret and Samuel in the living room. I need to finalize everything with Alex, I said, my voice heavy with exhaustion. I can't keep dragging this out. Margaret nodded, her eyes filled with sympathy. It's time, Felicity. You need to protect yourself and Daniel. Samuel leaned forward, his expression serious. What do you need us to do? I need to meet with Alex and lay everything out, I said, taking a deep breath. I want to make it clear that we're done, and I need to block all contact with him and Christina. But I need to make sure Daniel is safe while I do this. Margaret reached out and squeezed my hand. We'll take care of Daniel. You focus on what you need to do. The next day, I arranged to meet Alex at a neutral location, a small cafe downtown. As I drove there, my heart pounded with a mix of fear and determination. This was it, the final step in severing ties with the man who had betrayed me. When I arrived, Alex was already seated at a corner table, looking anxious. I took a deep breath and walked over, sitting down across from him. Felicity, he began, but I held up a hand to stop him. Alex, this isn't a discussion, I said firmly. I've made my decision. We're done. His face fell, but he nodded. I understand. But what about Daniel? I still want to be a part of his life. We'll work out visitation, I said, my voice steady. But for now I need space. We both do. I handed him a folder containing the legal documents my lawyer had prepared. These outline the terms of our separation. I need you to sign them. Alex looked through the papers, his expression one of resignation. I'll sign them, he said quietly. I just want to make sure Daniel is okay. He will be, I said, my voice softening slightly. But you need to give us time. As Alex signed the papers, I felt a sense of finality. This chapter of my life was closing, and a new one was beginning. I'll respect your wishes, Alex said, handing the signed documents back to me. But please, keep me updated on Daniel. I will, I promised, standing up. Goodbye, Alex. As I walked out of the cafe, a weight lifted off my shoulders. It was done. I had taken the final step to protect myself and Daniel. Back at the house, Margaret and Samuel were waiting for me. How did it go? Samuel asked, his eyes filled with concern. It's done, I said, handing him the signed papers. We're officially separated. Margaret hugged me tightly. I'm so proud of you, Felicity. You've been so strong. But as I sat down, a new wave of anxiety washed over me. What about Christina? I need to make sure she stays out of our lives too. Samuel nodded. We can block her contact, but you might need to take legal steps if she doesn't back off. I know, I said, my voice trembling. I just want to put all of this behind us. That night, as I lay in bed, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was still unresolved. I had cut ties with Alex, but Christina was still a looming presence. I needed to confront her one last time, to make sure she understood the consequences of her actions. The next morning, I called Christina. We need to talk. Can you meet me at the park in an hour? Felicity, I don't think that's a good idea, she said, her voice wary. It's not a request, I said firmly. Be there. As I drove to the park, my mind raced with thoughts of what I would say. This was the final confrontation, the last step in reclaiming my life. When I arrived, Christina was already there, looking nervous. I walked over, my heart pounding with a mix of anger and determination. Christina, this ends now, I said, my voice steady. You need to stay away from me and my family. She looked at me, tears welling up in her eyes. Felicity, I'm so sorry. I never meant to hurt you. It's too late for apologies, I said, my voice cold. You made your choices, and now you have to live with them. As I walked away, I felt a sense of closure. This was the end of the chapter, and a new one was beginning. I had faced my fears, confronted my betrayers, and now it was time to focus on rebuilding my life with Daniel. Everything was at stake, but I was ready for whatever came next. The morning dawned clear and bright, a stark contrast to the storm of emotions I felt inside. Today, I was going to send Alex's belongings to Christina's address, along with a detailed letter outlining his betrayals. It was the final act of closure, the last step in reclaiming my life. I packed the last of Alex's things into boxes, each item a painful reminder of the life we once shared. But with each box sealed, I felt a sense of liberation, as if I were physically and emotionally packing away the past. Margaret and Samuel helped load the boxes into the car. Daniel was at school, blissfully unaware of the final act of this painful chapter. Are you sure you want to do this? Margaret asked, her eyes filled with concern. Yes, I said, my voice resolute. They need to face the consequences of their actions. This is the only way I can truly move on. Samuel nodded, his expression supportive. We'll be right here if you need us. I drove to Christina's house, the boxes in the back seat and the letter clutched in my hand. As I pulled up to her driveway, I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what I had to do. I rang the doorbell, my heart pounding in my chest. Christina opened the door, her face a mix of surprise and apprehension. Felicity, what are you doing here? I came to deliver something, I said, my voice steady. I handed her the letter and gestured to the boxes in the car. These are Alex's things, and this letter details everything he's done. Christina's face paled as she took the letter. Felicity, please. No, I interrupted, my voice firm. You need to read this. You both need to understand the damage you've caused. I turned and walked back to the car, feeling a sense of finality. As I drove away, I glanced in the rearview mirror and saw Christina standing in the doorway, the letter clutched in her hand. Back at the house, Margaret and Samuel were waiting for me. "How did it go?" Samuel asked, his eyes filled with concern. "It's done," I said, feeling a weight lift off my shoulders. "I've delivered the boxes and the letter. It's over." Margaret hugged me tightly. "I'm so proud of you, Felicity. You've shown incredible strength." As the days passed, a sense of peace began to settle in. Daniel adjusted well to our new home, and I found solace in writing again. My next novel began to take shape, inspired by the strength and resilience I had discovered within myself. One evening, as I sat at my desk, Daniel came in holding a drawing. "Mom, look. I drew our new house." I took the drawing, my heart swelling with love. "It's beautiful, sweetheart. Just like our new life." Daniel climbed into my lap, looking up at me with those big, innocent eyes. "Are we going to be okay, Mom?" I hugged him tightly, feeling a sense of certainty I hadn't felt in months. "Yes, Daniel. We're going to be just fine." As I tucked him into bed that night, I realized how far we had come. The betrayal and pain were still there, but they no longer defined us. We had a new life, filled with hope and possibility. The next morning, I received a call from my lawyer. "Felicity, I wanted to let you know that Alex has agreed to the terms. The separation is finalized." I felt a sense of relief wash over me. "Thank you. This means a lot." As I hung up the phone, I looked around our new home, feeling a sense of pride and accomplishment. We had faced the storm and come out stronger on the other side. Later that day, I took Daniel to the park, watching as he played with other children. Margaret and Samuel joined us, their presence a constant source of support and love. As I sat on the park bench watching Daniel laugh and play, I felt a sense of contentment. Life had thrown us a curveball, but we had navigated it together. We were stronger, wiser, and ready for whatever came next. I took a deep breath, feeling the warmth of the sun on my face. This was our new beginning, and I was ready to embrace it with open arms. The past was behind us, and the future was filled with endless possibilities. And with that, I knew we were finally free.